Welcome back to the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. I'm Reuben Abati. Now, before we went on break, we were discussing Nigeria at 57. And we were saying that, look, Nigerians are excited, they are celebrating. You can even see I have a green tie, trying to show that today is a special day. And even Yemi here is decked in green, to show a lot of patriotism. And many people going to church today were practically draped in the national flag. I've seen a lot of that on social media. But what kind of Nigeria do we want to see? Because I think that's the real part of it going forward. Because every Independence Day, we seem to go through the same ritual. The president offers a speech, we review what has happened, we celebrate, we wear, national colors. Where would we like to see Nigeria? Say, in another 57 years, what kind of Nigeria do we envision for our children and maybe great-grandchildren?
Let's start the discussion this way.
Yes.
Let us seek an understanding of the behavioral pattern of the Nigerian. You see, because of the situational reality of work, tension here and there, whenever there is a day off, call it holiday, every Nigerian is happy, all right? So it is not what is responsible for the holiday that is the issue. But the mere fact that you are free and they work. The second point is that the nature of the Nigerian is very individualistic. We are not institutional, oriented. The individual is stronger than the institution in Nigeria. Exactly. This is the basic truth. So when we talk about Nigeria at 57, in fact, as we are still celebrating Nigeria at 57, others are thinking of Nigeria at 58. When will this day come? Will it fall on a weekend and then have Monday, Friday? Yes.
So on the contrary, I think we're very hardworking.
I'm not disputing that. You see, the references you made, the Wale cars of this world, they attained their feat by dint of hard work individually. The Adamolekuns of this world, please go to the UN, go and see his record. Go and see the way he presented and defended the country, but on individual capacity. So Nigerians are thriving, are making progress. The entrepreneurs in this country, they are not entrepreneurs because Nigeria made them. No. It is because of their sweat, what they do. And that's what people are talking about. When we say we are celebrating and we say we have achievements, I am saying scientifically, there is no justification, there is no basis for measurement. As at 1960, if, for instance, we want to measure our success at 57, what was the agenda set in 1960 that you now want to use as measurement?
Prof, you recall that there were national development plans in which, the leaders at that particular point after independence, yes, defined a vision for the country. First development plan, fourth development plan, Vision 2020 and all that. So there has been some thinking about the direction in which Nigeria should go. There may have been problems in terms of governance, in terms of the leadership recruitment process. But I pose the question about the future because, it's not enough to just worry about the present. Where do we go from here with that Nigeria, Yemi?
Well, one is really just sorting out this issue of who are Nigerians and under what structure do we want to stay at as one entity. Because I think if we continue to do 2 steps forward, then continue to have meetings, agitations, people want to go, don't go, come, stay, we can't go by force, stay, it doesn't help in terms of this building of an identity, of a national identity. Now, the plans are all there. We have enough plans for, I don't know, probably 50 years. We write very well. Implementation is an issue. So secondly, deal with the issue of what's Nigeria. Secondly, in a sense, for Nigerians to actually participate in an electoral process that brings the kind of leadership that we think will cast a vision that we want to follow. We haven't had that, unfortunately. We've had, since I returned to democracy, we've had interesting presidents, but I don't think we've really had a president that's been able to cast a vision of this is the Nigeria that I see, and this is how we're working towards it. So not that we're recounting achievements on paper, but that, as you said, if the president was speaking on a day like today, this is Nigeria at 57. Tell me a vision that you see for Nigeria of the future. The president said nothing about that, absolutely nothing.
Well, I mean, he says that his administration will rededicate itself to addressing the various issues going forward. But now that you are, putting everything on elections and the leadership that emerges, without INEC saying campaigns should start, at least one person, one governor, has started his own campaigns. He has officially launched, and that's the governor of Ekiti State, Ayo Fayose. He says he will be president, and he believes I will be president. The leadership of his party at this moment has said, look, the presidency is going to be zoned to the north. He says, well, he wants to be president. That's what he knows. And he's already articulating his vision. You must have monitored his recent declaration. Some people think it's some kind of game. Some people think...
the criteria as laid out by the Constitution.
What criteria?
The age, school, education, meets the...
And then the time hasn't come. Yeah. I used to worry about Fayose's age of ideas. Not anymore. Now I'm worried about his capacity to actually embrace new ideas. And
well, maybe he hold that attack on Fayose for a moment. Let's see the video. Let's hear him out, what he's saying, what he's offering. His own vision.
I am the Nigerian man to watch out for as we go into another decade. If you like, believe. If you don't like, don't believe. But one day, you will make reference to today. Yes. That you are part of this declaration, Mr. President. Let me come and visit you. Today, for the Touting Thomases, watching me in the television, under the sound of my voice, looking at me eyeball to eyeball, I don't want to be a billionaire, I want to be president of Nigeria. To say I represent the voice of the voiceless. I represent the common man in Nigeria who are facing hunger every night, going to bed sick because of the choice they made. Without telling me, I know I have so many adversaries. I know I have haters. They will not die. They will not die. They will see me the same way they saw me return to the government house of Ekiti. They will see me enter this villa by the grace of God in 2019. They said they zone to the north. What if nobody comes from the north? Will our party not have a candidate? Today, I challenge them. If truly they deserve this zone, they should come out. Let me say this very expressly. Those of them in the party, current party ESCO, working committee, who is afraid of us, who wants to contest as president, come out. You can't use the party machinery against our members. I want to challenge all of them to a contest, to the field. What are they afraid of? Most of you are governors at different times. Most of you are leaders of...
I wouldn't use the word that, your adversaries. I think his usage of the word adversaries is very strong. But there's something that came out of that, this point about zoning. Prof. earlier on was talking about emphasis on the individual rather than institutions. And he's saying it should not be a given that the presidency of Nigeria in 2019 is zoned again to the north. Now, that I think it's a serious issue that he has raised, because all the people opposed to him are saying, no, in 2019, the leadership must go to the north. Whereas there's nothing in the Nigerian constitution that says, it's just an unwritten code even by only one political party. But it seems to be something that is being elevated to the level of a given, that the president must come from a particular, and once you do that, you restrict competition. And then getting the kind of leader that you want, that you were talking about, and you are relying on election, means that, of course, the space is already constricted.
You have raised 3 issues in one within the context of the next 57 years. The first one is this issue of zone. The second one is the position of the president, all right? And the third one is Fayose. Now, the position of Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari hypothetically cannot allow for a country, a nation, Nigeria, that will be completely free from political chicanery in the next 57 years. Why? Because the hypothetical trust of his governance is that there is no negotiation, national unity is not negotiable. I am saying that the moment you adopt a rigid position, a manu military approach, then all that will follow can only be by coercion. And then that is against democratic freedom. The second point, Fayose can turn out to be another Donald Trump. All right? In his manner, in his thoughts, the way he's going about it. Anyone can, like a doubting Thomas, not believe who expected Donald Trump to win the election. Some believed, but the majority did not. But we are now confronted with fait accompli. Then on zoning, at the end of the day, you rightly pointed out earlier too, it places restrictions. But the restriction is at the level of a major threat to fundamental human rights. By the time you say you are zoning, you necessarily prevent some individuals, all right, who are interested. You deny them the right to contest. So when we put all these 3 factors together and look at the next 57 years, we are certainly going to be moving in vicious circles. Because one, in many countries of the world, you can contest as an individual without necessarily being a member of a political party. Our constitution in Nigeria places greater emphasis on the political party. So independent candidature does not exist. These are factors necessarily militating against development of democratic freedom. And without democratic freedom, please.
Well, it's interesting that only recently independent candidacy was discussed, by the National Assembly. And there are many Nigerians who are pushing for it. And we've seen the beauty of that in the recent elections in Kenya, which was annulled, where you had a situation where even a 23-year-old student, as an independent candidate, won an election. But it's the presidential election, of course, that they are, fighting over in Kenya. Now, this whole point about zoning, there are people who have said, look, it's inevitable in Nigeria because of this concept of rotational presidency, because of this need to balance, because one of the major things that make Nigeria a fragile state, the Fragile States Index says Nigeria is the 13th most fragile state in the world. The 2017 report states that. And for you to deal with this fragility, you have to address the challenge of the competition for power. So I don't know what you think, because...
Absolutely, I was going to say that, actually. Because when you look at the multiplicity of our ethnic makeup, you can't but thank those who have come up with the idea of zoning, in honest, truth. There's no way we can balance this power game if we don't say, okay, for a certain period of time, it should go here. After a while, it should go here. Then that is how it could actually go
But is
around.
the assumption not that when it comes to our turn, our man in power would actually do stuff that benefits us? All the presidents we had post-1919 have proven that wrong. Obasanjo Southwest, even recently, Goodluck Jonathan and the South-South. So I don't know.
I don't think it is predicated on that assumption. No.
It's just that we want our person in power.
And talk about Prof's fears for Fayose becoming another thing. I think Trump only got there because of the Electoral College, which we don't have here. So it won't be that close.
But what's interesting, though, for Fayose to even say that very public, that he's the voice of the voiceless. This is a man that owes 8 months of salaries. Yet he's claiming he's the voice of the voice in his state. Ekiti being probably, if I'm not mistaken, the smallest state in Nigeria for federal allocation, but yet you want to be president of a nation and suddenly you would solve the problems of the man.
Maybe it is not the appropriate forum to begin to assess his, his candidacy, his declared interest and all of that. But I imagine that by early next year, or even before the end of this year, the major issue in Nigeria will be nothing but politics. And how that affects the governance process. Because you could have a situation whereby once the campaign starts, once likely candidates begin to come up, governance goes on hold. And in the light of the 57 achievements outlined by the federal government, I hope there will be enough space to achieve more ahead of the 58th independence anniversary, both at the federal level and at the state level. Because once Nigerians get locked into this campaign mode, it's as if everything stops. But there was a point that came out of the discussion, this whole issue about independence. Now, if you look at parts of the world, even today in Spain, the Catalonians, they've taken over about 160 schools with their children since Friday. Today, they want to have a referendum. But the Spanish government, the response seems and sounds so familiar because, policemen have been drafted onto the streets to frustrate that referendum. And the people say, look, we want to be independent. And here we are, we're celebrating independence. The same thing in Iraq, the Iraqi Kurdistan. They are also negotiating with the central government. And also in Myanmar, you have a different kind of issue, dealing with human rights and issues of identity in Rakhine State, where, the Rohingya people have been described as the most oppressed, most pressurized. So it will look like some of these things we worry so much about in Nigeria seem to be happening in other parts of the world. But let's take a break, and then we'll come back and look at this in greater detail. You are still watching the Sunday talk show, This Day Live, here on Arise channel with me, Reuben Abati. We'll take a short break and then return. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the Sunday talk show here on Arise News channel. I'm Reuben Abati. Before we went on break, we were talking about independence, special day for Nigeria and Nigerians. And I had brought up the issue of the referendum in Catalonia and the reaction of the Spanish government saying the unity of Spain is non-negotiable. The unity of Spain is a settled matter. Quite familiar, isn't it?
When I saw the news, I quickly went in to read thoroughly to see what was actually happening, because I know that we had a similar problem here. And the interesting thing is, the Spanish government cited Constitution, said this is unconstitutional. And then they served the notice that don't do it, don't go ahead. So the Catalonian people went ahead, and the government had to move in to save the Constitution. So they had something to hide under to do whatever they are doing to the Catalonian people now. So when you relate that, back home here, it's very close. The government has a responsibility to protect the unity of Nigeria, and whatever IPOB was doing then was against the spirit of one Nigeria. So government too moved in, tag them terrorists, prescribe them, and then life goes on. I don't know. Prof. I think...
You see, you rightly pointed out the critical issue there. Spanish constitution does not allow for that type of secession, etc. But the truth and the implication is clear. In spite of an existing law well known by everybody, the Catalonians decided that, look, they want to opt out of it. It is not that they do not know that the law exists. The law exists. Just to now let you know that in the context of Nigeria, the extent to which you can be arguing non-negotiability of an issue doesn't mean much. So when people are decided and they want to move in a particular direction, the best you can do is to discuss rather than adopting a manu-military approach. The second point there, quickly, is that when I raised the issue of what do we mean by independence, independence from the colonialists is what we have been celebrating. But the Yoruba people at a point in time wanted independence.
They still do.
I'm coming now, you are very right. The Igbo people too want independence. It's still the same independence. Whether they explain the rationale in the context of self-determination or not wouldn't matter. All right. The Northerners also talked about independence.
Really,
Independence, independence in terms of withdrawal. Look, please, look at the genesis in the 1950s, before accession to independence. Please, look at the crisis in the Western region, 1962.
In fact, the Northerners, the whole concept of Araba, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it very well.
It's Araba.
At a point, you know, the North also didn't want to be part of Nigeria.
Yes.
Because they felt marginalized, they felt victimized.
Please, these are different interpretations of the concept of independence. So in a nutshell, in our own context here, in the next 57 years, if we can place greater emphasis on discussion, sharing ideas, it will be better. But to suggest that an issue is not negotiable, please, you are only creating unnecessary problems.
I agree.
I agree as well.
I agree.
Cannot be.
I don't
Well,
think
I guess the whole point of this is that anywhere in the world, people want to be free. They want to enjoy their rights to freedom, their rights to free speech, their right to human dignity.
Yes.
But in Nigeria, as we celebrate 57 years of independence, we seem to continue to face these challenges. Take, for example, now, one of the things you brought up, you said the Nigerian government has approved Facebook and Google to share user information. And that means, you know,
You are now monitoring.
some of us who are very active on the social media as Nigerians, you have to be careful what you put there.
Watch what you
You know, because Big Brother is watching you.
But it's not peculiar to us. In the same report, they talk about the US and the quantity. I mean, relative to the US, it's sort of minute.
Yeah.
But I think what's most important is when they get the data, if they do get the data, what do they do with it?
Yes.
And in the context of our
That's the debate.
Cybersecurity Act, that's worrisome because people have been arrested for abusing governors and being picked up and jailed for that. So in that context, that's why it becomes worrisome, not that they've requested the data.
But hate speech itself is criminalized.
Yeah, but it's not hate. The fact that I think a governor is not behaving properly or is being irresponsible with money, it's not hate speech at all. And you have no right to pick me up for saying that. I can say that. You're wasting money or you're stealing money if there's evidence to show misappropriation. You shouldn't pick me up for that. That's not hate speech.
Well, just be careful, because in some other African countries, like Robert Mugabe's country, when you say certain things, you are the president says you are an agent of the devil. Okay. And Mugabe says anybody who says he should leave office is an agent of the devil. Yes.
In Egypt, it is forbidden to criticize Mr. President publicly on the pages of newspapers, etc.
Well, I don't imagine that a day will come and that we will have that in Nigeria. We're still relatively a country of very free people, great nation,
Relatively free.
good people. Well, we'll go again for a short break, but stay tuned. When we return, we'll take a look at the economy 57 years after independence.